I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, or possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you, listener, for tuning in to today's episode of the Oracles with James Tyson. It's me, James. Today, I'm bringing you a friend of mine, Dick Larson. He has been on the show before, actually a couple of years ago on my other show, and it seems to be just time to bring him back. And you'll know once you start listening to what we're going to be talking about. Dick was a business executive in Southern California for about 20 years before becoming a counselor and an educator. He's a volunteer with a group called Share International. Now, if you're not pushing a vacuum around right now or chasing the kids around the house or listening to this on the way to work, you have an opportunity. Google, just enter it in. I was going to say Google Share International, or you can just put it in the website, shareinternationalsocal.org. The SoCal is SOCAL for Southern California. So shareinternationalsocal.org. It's a worldwide nonprofit educational organization, and Dick's been a guest on radio talk shows nationwide and produced a series of public access television shows that aired around the United States. Now, Dick's source in all of this was a British artist and futurist named Benjamin Creme. That's C-R-E-M-E. Benjamin was the author of 17 books, which offered the latest Ageless Wisdom teachings and the primary source of information about the world teacher for this age. And that's why we've got Dick Larson coming back in today. The world teacher for this age. We're going to be talking about that, who that is, and what is in store in their understanding to Share International and the Ageless Wisdom teachings for our planet, and why now. The Ageless teacher, Maitreya, and if you're familiar with Buddhism, you may have heard the term Maitreya or the name Maitreya. Maitreya is said to be an ascended master, and he is the ascended master. Other ascended masters, we talk about those too. We talk about this historically, about every 2,000 years. These teachers, these great teachers, have appeared at the beginning of each of the new planetary cycle or age. And we are leaving the last planetary cycle. The last planetary cycle was Pisces. And Jesus showed up as the teacher at the beginning of Pisces. We are now moving out of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And you'll say, James, what about the second coming of Jesus? Well, Jesus isn't coming back. That we've talked about a few times. I think the term was second coming of Christ, and Christ being a title, not Jesus's surname. So, yeah, there'll be another guy coming. The examples have always been there. There's Confucius, Krishna, Buddha, Muhammad, and Jesus was the last guy. So, Maitreya, he's the next one. I apologize, it's not a female. It's just the way it's worked out this time. We're at the beginning of such a cycle, and he is expected to be the teacher for the age, the world teacher. And he's here now and has been behind the scenes, believe it or not, just from south of London. And he's been around the world since July 19th, 1997. He's appeared, believe it or not, to thousands of individuals worldwide. And since December 2009 has been interviewed over 24 times on a major American TV network and over 100 times in other countries, not yet revealing his true identity. Now, don't panic. He's not here to start a new religion. He's a teacher. He's a guide. He's a counselor for all humanity, for all people of all religions, and for those who do not have a religion. It's all good. He's only here to do some guidance. It's a teacher. It's not a dictator. It's not somebody who's going to be in charge of anything. We talk about that. We talk about him. When he shows up, there'll be no more popes. because you won't need them anymore. It's one of those things. It just be we will understand. We will get the answers to the question why. He's basically here ultimately to teach us about creating the right relationships and justice in all spheres of our life: political, economic, educational, financial, cultural, social, doing all the good things. And if you wonder why it's coming up to the time now that he's showing up, his first priorities are food, housing, healthcare, education, and basic human rights, as well as reversing environmental degradation of our planet. So look out your window, people. This would be a good time for him to show up, because all of these are boiling. These are all a bit of a rash on our skin right now. So good time for him to show up. Now he's here again as a teacher to help us, including removing the guilt and fear of death, as well as teaching, God's will and the purpose behind that will itself. We talk about the fear of death, the guilt. Some religions, it's come to fix basically religions, because they've played too much into, oh, you did that, you're going to be bad, you're going to burn in hell, unless of course you give the church money, or unless you do this. Well, we went a little bit sideways in the last 2,000 years with religion. They're going to come in and he's going to come in and straighten this thing out. Maitreya over time has predicted numerous events that later came to pass, including a breakup of the Soviet Union, the end of apartheid in South Africa with the release of Nelson Mandela. And these were all recorded in the 17 books that Benjamin Creme had put forward. Very, very interesting conversation. We even talk about space people, as Dick calls them, because he doesn't like the word alien. I like ET, extraterrestrials. They're here helping us, but they're not going to come forward either until Maitreya does, because it's not their planet. They're here helping because we're screwing it up. And that's why you're not getting disclosure. So don't be beating yourself over the head with that. You're not going to get disclosure until we understand globally of what's going on. So we talk about how the communication will come from Maitreya to all of us. It's very, very interesting. Again, banging this over the head. He's not here to start a new religion. Just so everyone just deep breath, relax. He's not here to be a dictator. He's not taking over. He's not the only one. There'll be masters, 14 ascended masters on Earth right now. They're going to come in. I think it'll be 40 of them by the time this whole thing gets going, and they will be in charge of helping us as a sounding board. Like, should we build this or should we do that? They're going to, because we have free will, they'll be kind of pointing us into the right direction. We talk about karma. We talk about, again, removing guilt, the last pope. It's very, very interesting. It's kind of all over the place. And when I say all over the place, we talk about a number of things, because you can imagine some being coming in, or some energy coming in and saying, hey, this is who I am, believe it or not. When that person comes in, when that energy shows up, when Maitreya steps forward, it will be time. It's not going to be tomorrow, so don't worry about it. It could be in another 18 months to 2 years, which gets in a whole other timeline that I've been talking about on our shows in regards to aliens and, I shouldn't say the word alien, extraterrestrials and them showing up. So we'll see. We'll see how this all plays out. So you've got some time left to try to relax and get your own karma out of there. But it's very, very interesting, the information that Dick has, and I'm going to go get him right now. Again, just Dick Larson. Hello, Dick. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you for that kind introduction, James.
Oh, you're very welcome, kind sir. It's really good to have you back. Tell me, when did you and Benjamin Creme actually get together? What was your connection?
Well, Benjamin Creme from London, spelled C-R-E-M-E. It looks like cream, but it's pronounced creme. He used to come to New York and then Los Angeles and then San Francisco and give a lecture once or twice a year as he traveled the world for over 40 years giving out the information we're going to be talking about today. And a friend told me that I should check out his lecture when he came to Los Angeles. This was 28 years ago. And so I went. Well, I'd never heard anything like it. Most of his information went right over the top of my head, but I did get about 10 or 20% of it that I was able to absorb. And my reaction, James, was, this makes sense. Now, I grew up a Christian, so that was the basis for my spiritual belief. And then I started to investigate some of the other great religions of the world out of curiosity. And then I heard Benjamin Creme speak, and he said that he was the latest revealer of the Ageless Wisdom teachings. And the Ageless Wisdom teachings, of course, is an ancient philosophy. It's not a religion. Philosophy as old as humanity that's been passed down mostly oral over the eons to humanity. And then the last two writers of the Ageless Wisdom were Alice A. Bailey, who wrote about 20 books in the 1930s and 40s, and then Benjamin Creme, who was the latest one to give the Ageless Wisdom information for our time. He passed away in his 90s a few years ago. I knew him very well. I interviewed him 3 times on television. I spent a lot of time with him. Even though he is from London, he would spend time over here, and myself and others spent time with him. Anyway, that's how I got involved. I thought, this makes sense. It answered questions my religion couldn't answer for me in a couple of cases, and it caught my interest. So I read a book by him, and then I thought, this is worth checking out. So I subscribed to his monthly magazine called Share International, which is in about 60 countries, I think, a bunch of different languages, and it has information about the Ageless Wisdom and about what's going on now. It has good news about advances that humanity is making in the areas of feeding and housing people and so on. And so I got kind of caught up in it in that way, and I decided to become a volunteer for Share International and help Benjamin Creme give out this information. So I'm not the only one. There are other people around the world who are also volunteers for Share International. Share International is a nonprofit educational organization trying to get out the information primarily of the world teacher who is here now waiting for the right time to come forward. So that's my story. I'm from Southern California. That's where I am right now. And a couple things, James, if you don't mind, I'd like to tell your listeners ahead of time. One is the source of my information, which you kind of already did. The source of my information is the Ageless Wisdom teachings, primarily through Benjamin Creme. He has about 17 books on Amazon.com. I'm not here to sell books, but in case anybody wants to check them out, they can do that. And the other thing I'd like your audience to know is please don't believe anything I say, because that would be blind belief, and I can't recommend that to anybody. I'm not here to convince your audience that what I say is true. I'm not here to get them to think like I think. I'm just here to give out my information, James, and maybe 10 or 20% or maybe even 30% of it will make sense to some folks out there and give them some hope in this difficult time that we have right now. So that's kind of my story.
Well, that's kind of interesting because I this weird thing, and my listener knows this, is that I can see empaths, and I get a vision of a person standing beside them with giving me hand signals, and the person who stands beside you shows, and this is the symbol I get quite often, is there's a bag over their shoulder, and they're reaching into the bag, pulling out seeds and throwing the seeds. That's what they're saying about you.
That's cool.
Which is basically what you just said. You're not the one you are not the plant, but you're just basically throwing these seeds out, and if they germinate, they germinate, but your job is just to throw seeds.
That's a beautiful analogy, James. I agree with it 100%. And the reason I can tell this story and ask people not to believe me is because I'm nobody famous. See, if I was famous, then people would be more influenced than they really should be by what I say. But since I'm not, I can say stuff and people will just take it or leave it. And that's perfect.
Yeah, those famous people, watch out for them. When you say that analogy, that comes actually from a gentleman who's standing to your left.
Yeah, okay.
So
I'm sorry.
I can see him.
I didn't mean to demean your comment.
No, but I understand what you mean, because you think, but that's the reason they give me the image, because it's an easy one for me to translate.
Good.
So that's kind of cool that you have that.
Yeah.
But it's one of the things that is one of the things on your path now, is to just throw the seeds out, and if they germinate, fine. If they don't, at least that you did that. Now, when you talk about things like this person who is in waiting to come out, who is this?
His personal name is Maitreya, like my personal name is Dick and yours is James. His personal name is Maitreya, which in Sanskrit means, roughly translated, the happy one, the one who brings joy. And he is a member of the spiritual kingdom for planet Earth. And he's one of what they call the ascended masters, or the masters of wisdom. These are people, James, who have gone ahead of us in evolution here on planet Earth. So there are people who have evolved, they've become perfected men and women, and then they don't need a body anymore because they've learned all the lessons planet Earth has to teach us. This is where we're all going, by the way. And then they don't need a body anymore, and they become a permanent consciousness or permanent spirit that's affiliated with planet Earth if they choose to stick around. And the Ageless Wisdom says that there are 63 of these great beings who have stuck around planet Earth and inspired humanity, been the inspiration for humanity behind the scenes over the eons for the great painters and the great scientists and so on, the great writers and so on of humanity. So they're called masters of the wisdom, or ascended masters, and he is their leader, one of their leaders here for planet Earth. He and the Buddha are brothers. They were the first two human beings from Earth to graduate and become permanent spirits. And so they have different jobs. It's called a spiritual hierarchy, James, because just like some people on the planet are more evolved than others, we're at different levels. We're all at different levels. That's what makes the world go around. Same thing is true in the spiritual universe. The spirits, or the consciousness of people, is at different levels. Now, of course, they're not people. They don't have any sex, but their consciousness, that used to be a person or several people, thousands of people. And so we know these masters as people that were Krishna, Jesus, Buddha, Confucius. Joan of Arc is one of the great masters. Mary, who was the mother of Jesus, is one of the great masters. These are the masters of the wisdom. And of course, they're master scientists. They understand all the science of planet Earth and of physical being, and they're not subject to it. They're not subject to gravity anymore, that kind of thing. They are subject to God's laws, though. And one of those laws, James, is that we have free will. It's the secret to humanity's growth. We make a choice, and then we hopefully learn from our choice. The goal isn't to choose right every time. The goal is to always learn from our choice. We can learn from a poor choice. We can learn from a wise choice. And so that's our goal, is to learn and grow, learn and grow, learn and grow. So free will is sacred. And the masters would never, ever tell us what to do or make us do anything. That would be breaking God's laws, and they're not going to do that. So they operate within those kinds of laws of nature. And if you don't believe in God, then you can just say the universe is laws, whatever you want to call it. So that's who Maitreya is. He's one of the leaders, one of the most evolved, because he was one of the first graduates from the human race, of the masters of wisdom. And he is coming himself this time. And that's why this is such a big event. He's actually here now in a physical body, James, on the planet. His home base is just outside of London, but he can travel anywhere he wants to. The masters travel by thought. So they can appear in 42 places at once, and we'll see them and shake their hand just like they're a real person, and they are temporarily. But that's because they are master scientists. They understand the science of physical matter and energy and so on. And that's who he is.
Very, very interesting and quite overwhelming, actually. I understand.
I know.
I understand the concept of the Ascended Masters, and in my belief system, in what I do, like especially, I'm one of those people that would get sleep paralysis. You get a dead human being decides to follow you home and try to scare you and feed off some energy, and I use the archangels to help pull that off, get them off of me. And once the archangels, I couldn't even say the word Michael in my head, which is, imagine trying to think a word and not being able to finish the word. I was completely puzzled by it.
Wow.
I didn't know at the time I had 3 of these things holding me down. So I said, okay, I'm going to go Ascended Masters on this guy. and that's why I pulled one of them out, and bam, the entire room was the most clear my room had ever been. Like, it was absolutely wonderful.
God, I'll bet that felt great, huh?
Oh, yeah. And I had the greatest sleep after that. And the next day, a psychic friend and I crossed over. She came remotely in and realized, oh, yeah, you got jumped by 3 of them. That's why they were really controlling you, and he actually growled in my ear.
Oh my gosh!
Trying to be a tough guy. Anyway, over. But that was it.
Well, you bring up a good point, James, if I may interrupt you just with a thought here real quickly, and that is when people see an angel, like sometimes people will see an angel at the foot of their bed if they're sick or whatever, they'll see an angel. They're never angels. We can't see the real angels. They're always a master. But see, the masters will come to us looking like an angel because they don't want to scare us, and they know we're not afraid of angels. Isn't that cool? Yeah,
they'll show you what we can accept.
Exactly.
It's like when your grandfather dies. Very seldom your grandfather dies in Chicago and shows up in L.A. at the foot of your bed, or stays in your bed and taps you on the foot and said, everything's going to be okay. That would scare the heck out of pretty well everybody. But
yes.
Those ones that it does happen, it's because he knows it's not going to scare them. So it doesn't happen to everybody because you don't want a dead relative standing at the foot of your bed or sitting on your bed saying everything's going to be okay, because you can poop yourself. And they understand that. There is an understanding that we are a little bit fragile in our belief system, and especially these things happen at night. So it's kind of creepy.
One of my best friends died several years ago, and about, I would say, a week after he passed, his wife called me specifically to talk to me because she knew about my spiritual background. And she said, the other day, I want to ask you something. She said, I looked up, I was sitting in the living room, I looked up, and my husband was standing right in the doorway to the bedroom, fully dressed, leaning on the door jamb, smiling at me, just as plain as could be. And then after about 10, 12 seconds, he disappeared again. What do you think? And I said, that was him. Yeah. He got permission to appear to you to let you know that he's doing fine and that he adores you.
Yep.
And so, that absolutely happens. But sometimes, like you said, people wouldn't be comfortable. Or if they're dying, for example, they'll see an angel. That's a very comforting symbol to most people. So the masters know they won't scare us. They don't want to scare us. They don't want to frighten us. So that's one of the ways they'll appear to people is as an angel. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I see, if I was standing in front of you right now, I can see the gentleman on your left, which is my right. But on your right-hand side, I see 5 beings. I call them beings. I have no idea what they are. And I see 4 of them as white, like white light. And I see the one, the furthest, is a teal green, but very, very tall. So that is either, and this is where I'm so new at this, or understanding, that it's either an archangel energy or it's a light being, like a light relative, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But the other ones, the ones I described, the white, I just call them angels because I have no other word for them. And
sure, of course.
They are on your side that is of a high, high, high frequency, where the person on your left is an in-between of your spirit guides and you. So it gets your attention quicker.
How interesting.
What that is a relative that has crossed over and come back and has volunteered. So of course, you and I understand that time is not linear, it's flat. So that relative of yours is there and can be 1,000 other places exactly at the same time.
Sure.
But when your spirit guides need to get your attention, like you're going to go around the corner and fall in a hole, for them to lower their vibration to get your attention quickly and you to be in a higher vibration that day, it takes a bit. So we have this volunteer that goes boom, hair on the back of your neck, goosebumps, the whole bit, your gut feeling all comes through that volunteer.
Yes.
And yours is a taller, thin gentleman who looks like he's in his early 70s, but actually healthy looking. Very, like he may even be younger, but to me, I'm getting a early 70s vibe. Most likely on your mother's side of your family, if that makes any sense. And,
well, I'm early 70s. I'm be 74 next month. So
this guy, that's when he passed. He passed in his early 70s, and I think it's on your mother's side. Do you have Irish on that side of your family?
German and Irish, yes. Okay. Most German.
Yeah. It's
My
funny.
dad is Scandinavian.
You glow in the dark. As far as Caucasians go, our indigenous background is Welsh, Irish, Scottish, Scandinavian, and then over top of Europe with a dip into the Black Forest in Germany. So that is, if we were to go back 300-400 years, we were living with the earth, not off of the earth. And we were closer to the earth. So it's easier for us to tap into that real connection to the planet itself. Anyway, this is not an interview with me; it's an interview with you. So anyway,
that's fascinating stuff.
But
James.
that's the fella who's the volunteer with you. And he's been there for a long time.
I'll take all the help I can get.
So anyway, you'll feel him. He's the goosebumps you get on your arm there. Most likely your right arm for some reason. You get goosebumps on your right arm first. You talk about Maitreya and your understandings through Benjamin Creme of who this gentleman is. Now, some of the things that we've talked, you and I talked years ago about this, but Maitreya's allegedly appeared to thousands of individuals worldwide since December, I think, 2009. And he's been interviewed over 24 times on major American TV networks and all over in other countries. But he hasn't revealed his identity yet. Is that ever going to be revealed, or is he just kind of waiting back? Oh, it is. Okay.
No, you make a very good point. He has been interviewing. That's why he's already coming forward, but not using his name. He's coming forward as an ordinary man right now. He has interviewed on a major network in the U.S. I don't know which network, and I've never seen it. He's interviewed on Mexican radio and television, South America, Brazil, Argentina, and so on. Then he's been interviewed by the BBC. They have an interview in the can, but the Queen told him, they asked the Queen and she said, don't show it. Which is interesting. Yeah. Well, she checked with the Church of England, and they said, no, that can't be. That can't be who he says he is. So she said, shut it down. So that'll come out eventually, though. He's been interviewed on Japanese TV. He's been interviewed in China. He's been interviewed in Russia, India, many countries. He's had over 200 interviews now. And he's interviewing. Here's the thing, to give just a little more detail to what you said, he's interviewing as an ordinary man, sometimes as part of a panel. And he's giving out his information, though. He's omniscient as far as, compared to us. And ultimately what his plan is that the media will finally realize that he knows too much to be an ordinary person. And they're going to say, wait a minute, who are you really? Come on, you know too much to be just an ordinary person. And that will give him permission, without infringing our free will, to come forward and have what he calls his day of declaration. Now, this is his plan. It may work out a little differently than this, because humanity can sometimes change things. But his plan is to come before humanity on radio and television, hooked up by satellites, and approach humanity and then declare who he is, that he's the teacher for the age of Aquarius, that he is here in a physical body. He'll be with us for the next 2,000 years at the center of humanity, making suggestions. He's not here to start a religion or anything like that. He said, if you're in a religion and it's working for you, great. He said, if you're not, I come for you too. I come for everyone. And so he's not here to start a religion. He's here to make suggestions, and kind of like a guide, James. And we will leave. We have free will. We can either follow his suggestions or not. He said that there will be a critical mass that will respond to him initially, that will be enough to start turning this planet around. I expect now. This is not official or anything like that from Share International, just me. But I expect, especially with the coronavirus going on right now, that we will see him, that he will come forward in one way or another within the next 18 months. That's my best guess. Now, it could be 2 years. It could be 6 months. It could be tomorrow. I don't know. Nobody knows the day or the time. So... but there will be ways you'll know it's him when he comes forward.
Well, one of the things that you and I have talked about before is that we talk about his priorities are
Yes.
food, housing, healthcare, education, and basic
Right.
human rights, and reversing environmental degradation here. It's crazy what's going on. But if you
Yes.
let's take a step back
Sure.
here in June 2020 and see what has been going on. We've got a global healthcare challenge, global pandemic that as a result shut down work for people, which in turn started cleaning the planet, giving the planet taking a breath. As we're coming out of that, stuff happened in the United States in regards to basic or human rights that has sparked international reaction. So we've got healthcare, we've got basic human rights, and environmental challenges all kind of happening. Those are the 3 out of the 5 groups that we were talking about.
That's
Now
right.
We're just dealing with food and housing. So we're getting close to we're at the boiling point. We're going to see exactly. We're going to blow the top off the pot at this point.
We're starting to wake up.
Yeah, and I think starting to wake up is really, Dick. That's a really good way of putting it, because the planet itself, or people themselves are waking up to the 5 different ideas of the food, housing, healthcare, basic human rights, environmental. That's kind of percolating right now, but waking up itself about in the last 10 to 15 years, people's little switches are being turned on to a higher vibration.
Yes.
And we're seeing that more and more. And the more I interview people who are of spiritual or even psychic, they're saying, yeah, there's a reason for this. There's a reason for the silly ghost TV shows that came out 15 years ago. The reason we look at is, okay, you believe in ghosts? Or look, ghosts could be around the house, and this is a really funny show, and I don't think they've ever got a picture of a ghost, but we'll keep watching it anyway. And then their grandmother says, oh, I used to see ghosts. Well, Grandma never wanted to tell you that because you'd think she was crazy.
Exactly.
I'd go to international Bigfoot conferences and I'd sit at tables with these people who were all retired, and they travel to the Bigfoot conferences because they can talk about Nana seeing the 9-foot hairy guy when she was 6 years old picking fruit in the backyard. But you can't talk about it at home with the kid, like in the family, because they all think Nana's crazy. But at these groups, they've all seen them. So we're coming out of that idea. Ufology. Oh, I've seen UFOs. I've done this, I've done that. People are now not afraid to say it out loud. And we are now looking at, what else is out there in the universe? What else is going on? And as a result, we're awakening to more of a spiritual side of things. It's not all doom, gloom. You get the people who demand disclosure. We need the government to come out and tell us that there are UFOs. Well, there's some really good reasons we can't go there right now. And that could be something the government knows, and the beings themselves are saying, yeah, you probably don't. If I come out and say, yes, I do exist, I also have to point out those guys that exist over there, and those guys are kind of creepy. So do you really want the rest of the humanity to know about that? Heck, we have people in the U.S. who want to build a bunker and take a gun in because you had Syrian refugees showing up. Imagine if they're saying, yeah, there's giant reptilians want to come down and eat you. Well, okay, how about build a bigger bunker? There are reasons we don't have that at this time, but it's coming. But it's not going to be up to us little pollywogs here to say it or not. It's going to be people like Maitreya who are going to come out with a little bit of a better way of articulating what's going to happen in the future. It's finding that teacher. It's having somebody point it out. And I know the Christians would be upset because they're all saying, well, no, Jesus, it's the second coming of Jesus. I think the term was the second coming of the Christ, which is a title. It doesn't have to be Jesus. It could be Debbie.
Right.
But
Jesus' last name was not Christ. Nobody had a last name. He was Jesus of Nazareth. You know, it was the city that you were from was the identity. And so you're absolutely right. The Christ, according to the Ageless Wisdom, the Christ for our planet is Maitreya, and the Christ is a position in the hierarchy.
Yeah, exactly.
And the age-old way that masters have given out their teachings to humanity is one of their very high disciples will agree before he's born. He's not done with his earthly evolution yet, but almost, will agree before he's born to let the master teach through him. And so Prince Gautama was born, and he knew that the Buddha was going to overshadow him, and the Buddha did. Once he matured, the Buddha's wisdom or his mind went into Prince Gautama's mind with Prince Gautama's permission, and Prince Gautama gave out the teachings of the Buddha, so he became known as Gautama Buddha. He wasn't the Buddha, but he became known as that because he gave out the Buddha's teachings. Jesus agreed to give out the Christ's teachings. So Jesus, from the time of the baptism to the time of the crucifixion, was overshadowed by Maitreya, who put his consciousness in Jesus with Jesus' permission, and gave. So when Jesus taught, he taught Maitreya, the Christ's teachings, so Jesus became known as Jesus the Christ. He was the Christ for those 3 years, giving out the Christ teachings, and so we're lucky because most of the planets don't even have a Christ. It's a very difficult and challenging position to obtain because you have to be able to embody the love of God. That's what the Christ is Christ consciousness is God consciousness, love consciousness. Actually, it's love wisdom, combination of the two. And that's what Maitreya is. And that's why this is such a big deal, because he is coming himself, not through one of his disciples. Jesus is one of the great masters now. He and Maitreya work hand in hand. By the way, any Christians listening or people with a Christian background will be happy to know Jesus is here also. And it's not going to be the end of the world. It's going to be the end of life as we knew it. We're going to start turning this thing around and getting humanity back on the path we're supposed to be on. Jesus is living on the outskirts of Rome. The Pope and a couple cardinals know he's here. They've been asked not to say anything because that would infringe the free will of every Roman Catholic on the planet, which is the largest religion in the world. If the Pope said, well, Jesus is here, everybody would believe it because the Pope said it. That's not right. We have to recognize them on our own when they come forward. And so Jesus is here as well. Now, my understanding with him, James, is that his job is to get the Christian church back on track. He will be at the head of the Christian church, which is mostly the Roman Catholic Church. There'll be no more popes. This is the last pope. Jesus will take his rightful place at St. Peter's throne. He will be figurative throne, and he will be at the head of the Christian church. And it's a great time to be alive if you're a Christian, because you'll be able to ask him, Jesus, did you really say this? Or what did you really mean when you said this? Kind of thing. And so he's here to help get the Christian church to clean it out. all the major religions need to have the man-made dogma cleaned out to get back to the original teachings that started that religion. So there'll be a master affiliated with every one of the major religions to help get those religions sorted out and get them back on track with the teachings they were supposed to be teaching. Not all this guilt stuff, you know. Maitreya comes to relieve guilt. He comes to remove guilt from humanity because he said it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. Just learn the lessons and move on. You know, and so so it's a great time to be alive, whether you're a Christian or not, because these teachers are going to be coming forward. Now, I had the same problem, James, that you were talking about with some people talking about ghosts and so on, or Bigfoot. Is when I started doing this, when I decided to help Benjamin Creme get the word out about the world teacher coming forward soon, I was scared because the problem with this information, James, is it's prophecy. And you can't prove prophecy. People have to just wait and see what happens. So I was very nervous. I know people are going to think I'm weird, and they have. I've been called the Antichrist. I've been called Satan. I've been called all kinds of things. But, you know, I'm used to it now. And so over time, as it became more real for me, it became easier to do this work. And I think all of this is true. I'm absolutely convinced 100%, or I wouldn't do this work.
Yeah, it is one of those things. Once you understand and truly connect the dots, you get a really good passion for a set of, well, I want to say understandings, not really a belief, but it becomes a belief based on education, research, and understanding.
Exactly. It becomes more than knowledge.
Yeah.
Because you know. You can't show it and prove it to anybody. You can't show ghosts to anybody and prove they're real. I can't show Maitreya or the masters to anybody and prove they're real. I just know because they have worked in my life. You know, it's like, how do you know there's a God? Well, if you've experienced God in your life, then you know there's a God. You can't show it to anybody. You can't prove it to them, but you know because you know, you know, inside you know. Well, that's the same thing with what you're doing and the same thing with what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I find it, like yesterday, I spent a good 2 hours crossing over dead people.
Wow.
Which is interesting through a psychic who, I'm the guy who does the interview with the dead person, find out why they're here and why they haven't crossed.
Yes.
And we then explain, well, most of them had crossed because they think they did something wrong. Now, going back to Maitreya, the teacher helping us, including the removing of guilt.
Yes.
That also removes the fear of death.
Of course.
A lot of these a lot of these people don't cross because they feel they are guilty of committing something, and because they have a religious background or a religious belief system. Oh my God, I coveted my neighbor's wife, I'm going to go to hell.
There you go.
Well, we got to look at them and say, you know, there's no hell, right? And
that's right.
You argue, but it's really cool because if they have any kind of religious spark in them, all we have to do, and I mean Christian religious, is say, well, if Jesus died for your sins, why would you still be punished? And all they have to do is to hesitate for a split second to go, wait, what? And think about it, and a family member comes through and says, no, they're telling the truth, you can come. Or we had one guy, his cellmate from prison came through and said, no, we're all good to go.
Wow.
And then they go, oh, okay. And then they cross. But it's getting that understanding and removing that fear of being guilty. And then therefore a fear of, we really don't fear death. We fear what happens after death.
We don't know.
Okay. Yeah,
it's the big unknown. Yeah.
Yeah, and once we explain, and mind you, most of the people I talk to are dead. So they understand what happens. They're going, oh crap!
Of course.
I thought I was just going to turn into worm food, and all of a sudden there was a light, and my relative showed up and said, "Come with me." And it's like, holy crap, no, because I embezzled from the company, and I can't go with you. I'm going to wait here. It's like, no, come on, dude. It's like, don't be afraid of dying. You're not going. Nothing bad is going to happen.
Yeah, right.
Just move on, because that's how we progress, and we will continue. It's the purpose. It's our purpose to learn, and you don't hesitate.
Yeah.
Some call it purgatory. Some call it just the other side of the veil. It depends. Unfortunately, we get a lot of children that don't cross because they literally want to wait for their mom and dad. It's
Sure.
like, no, I'm not going. I don't know who you are, great-grandmother. I've never met you before, so stranger danger. I'm going to wait for mom and dad. And it's like, oh, crap. So mom and dad passed 30, 40 years later and nowhere near where the kid is. Or, yeah, it's complicated. Death is complicated. Death is easy. After death is complicated.
One of the best descriptions I've heard of death is by Deepak Chopra. He said, somebody asked him, what happens to you when you die? And he said, I'll tell you, nothing. He said, if it's like if you're on a telephone conversation and somebody cuts the telephone wire, what happens to you? Nothing. You just can't communicate that way anymore. You know, I mean, it's just beautiful the way he said it. Your consciousness is still there and all of that. It's just your communication methods have changed now. You know, now it's telepathy. And I just thought that was the most beautiful description of what happens when you die. It's like cutting the telephone wire. I thought that was great.
We were talking to Dick Larson. He is a volunteer for Share International, a worldwide nonprofit educational organization, and love to have you back here talking about Maitreya and what's happening and what possibly is becoming around the corner. What do you think, with your connections and what you guys talk about at Share International and talking about Ageless Wisdom teachings and things, and you've got the COVID, where do you think we're going to be going from here?
Well, obviously I don't know.
What? Okay.
But this too shall pass. You know, I mean, absolutely, it's not going to be around forever. Now, I don't know how it's going to pass or when it's going to pass, but it is going to eventually go away. Although it's been tragic for many, many people, and I don't mean to discredit the tragedy that this is, I'm like you. I think there's a silver lining in this, because I think that it's an opportunity to learn a lot of lessons. And you mentioned before we came on the air, you mentioned about how the atmosphere is cleared out, and even in major cities now, like it never was before. How creatures of nature, birds and animals, are coming forth in different areas where they've never been seen before. That's because we're not stomping all over the place, you know, making them go hide. We're seeing what the planet can be like if we treat it with more respect. And that's a huge, huge lesson, which you mentioned earlier, that we can learn from this. That's just one of many. Another thing that we're learning from this is about migrant workers. When we don't have migrant workers working the farms, working the meat packing, providing cheap labor that a lot of other people aren't willing to do, things change. Things get worse. Things change badly. And so there's a lot of people, I think, the medical field and others, that are becoming much more highly respected and than they were before. You mentioned also that we're looking at healthcare. One of the things we found out is the healthcare system in the United States does not serve well to handle the pandemic. It just doesn't. It's not coordinated enough. We weren't prepared enough. It's still not reacting as well as we would like. It's not. So we can see that we need to do some fine tuning, if not major overhauls, with some of our institutions. We can see that we need a safety net for people, income-wise. Maybe a minimum standard of living income or something is in the future, because unemployment doesn't necessarily pay the bills. That needs to be repaired. We're seeing all of these issues that need attention that we weren't really that conscious of before. People are trying to feed homeless people now, trying to house homeless people now. They're getting much more attention. The whole Me Too thing has taken off completely about respect for women, and the abuse that women have suffered over the years. Black Lives Matter has completely brought the racial issues that are still alive, that kind of hide behind the scenes sometimes, completely brought them to the fore. So we're seeing an opportunity to learn a bunch of lessons. Now the question is, will we learn them? It seems like there might be a critical mass of people that are really responding to these displays of areas that don't work, don't serve humanity anymore, that don't serve the planet. And so I think this is the start of turning the world around. You know, James, I've been thinking for a long time that it was probably going to be the threat of World War III, atomic war, which would wipe out all life on the planet. The planet would basically have to start its evolution over. The threat of that would wake everybody up, would change people's lives. But you know what? There's only one thing that could do that besides World War III, and that's a worldwide pandemic. And here it is.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is no accident. You know what's happened? We're reaping what we sow. God's great law of cause and effect, also called karma in the East. The scientists call it the law of action versus reaction. It's all the same law, and humanity has not learned our lessons, and we have been making huge mistakes. We can't end war. We can't stop starvation and death from starvation. Every day, about every 9 seconds, somebody dies of a starvation or a starvation-related illness, and we can't stop killing the planet. And these and other lack of learning from humanity have finally reached a crisis. And what happens is the tension mounts and mounts and mounts until it reaches the tipping point, and then something really disastrous happens to humanity, and I think it's COVID-19.
Or COVID-20 and 21.
Well, yeah, we could be well on our way to those.
It is interesting to me what happened, interesting, fascinating, terrible, the whole bit of what's happened globally to humans. But in my, I take comfort in a belief that those people who died for a good cause, and that cause was the earth itself, showing us that, yeah, we are screwing this place up, and we have control over pollution, and we have control over the energy of the planet trying to fix itself. But that was given to us very blatantly when the switch was thrown and everything was shut down. The planet came back pretty darn quick in about a 2.5 month period. Imagine if we could go through and say, okay, what were all the things that shut down that really influenced what happened, where there was animal migration, bird migration, whatever? Was it strictly we weren't driving cars enough, or was it factories, or was it people just staying home and focusing their energy somewhere else? Is breaking those things down and seeing if we can adopt that for the next time. We talk about the canals in Venice, which is like the canary in the coal mine, it seemed to be, for this thing where all of a sudden you had the dolphins coming back and you could see the bottom of the canals. How long is it going to take for them to, who knows? Right now, the Venice is opened up. All the boating in that canal, other than the gondolas with the guy in the paddle, were all gas motors and noisy. So how quickly is that going to get polluted again? Or is somebody in Venice going to say, you know what, when everything was shut down, this area looked really good. Maybe we should keep it. And we're going to cut 20% of the boat traffic down, or switch as many as we can. We should get them all with electric motors or something different, and quit throwing crap in the water, or quit, the industrial stuff going into the ocean. Is that going to happen, or is it going to go back to normal and that switch is going to have to get thrown again? Which means a lot of people are going to have to die fighting the good fight, giving up their life in this world, in this particular meat sack, is going to have to check out, so that switch gets thrown again. We'll see. We'll see what's coming.
More Americans have died from the coronavirus than died in all of our wars. Over 120,000 Americans dead, and that's just in the United States. The United States has been hardest hit by this, as all your listeners know, James, and the Ageless Wisdom has something to say about that. it's said, now this is Benjamin Creme was in touch with one of the masters. He was trained on how to communicate with one of the masters of wisdom, and that's where his information came from. And I have no doubt whatsoever that that's true, because he answered questions there's no way he could know the answer to. It had to be a master. But in any event, so
I'm going to correct you on a stat you gave out.
Oh, good.
The amount of Americans that have died through COVID
Yes.
are about 10% of the American casualties in war. I think almost 2.8 million people have died in all the wars that Americans have been in.
Of Americans?
Yeah, you lost.
Oh, then
I'm sorry.
then I stand corrected. Thank you.
The Civil War itself killed over 600 and some thousand people.
Oh, well, then I need to brush up on my history, don't I?
And that was just U.S.
I hated history.
Confederates lost about 480,000, and
Holy
the
smokes.
Union lost about 650,000.
Well, I
Those are
stand
just the
corrected,
Civil
and
War.
I thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But 120,000 is an awful lot of people.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and what I know what I was going to say, the Ageless Wisdom, according to Benjamin Creme's masters, has a different view on this, or a unique viewpoint, and that is that one of the purposes of the release of the Antichrist energy periodically was released through Nero 2,000 years ago and basically destroyed the Roman Empire, which is what Nero did, and paved the way for Christendom. Well, it was released through Hitler and Mussolini and a couple Japanese generals in World War II to break down the old patterns and pave the way for the world teacher to come. Well, during World War II, most of the Western developed world suffered tremendous damage and loss of life and so on. But the U.S. didn't. We lost Pearl Harbor, was attacked, and that was about it. So karmically, the world went through a part of its, what we could call, not desert experience, but what was it the Jews had their wilderness experience.
Yeah, the wilderness, yeah.
But the United States didn't. And so I think we're catching up karmically with the rest of the world now in our own wilderness experience, because we have to burn up some karma before we can have this wonderful life that's coming in the future that Maitreya and the masters talk about. This brilliant, loving, plentiful, trusting, healthy future that humanity has in store. But we have to burn up some more karma before we can get there. And I think that this is part of it, including the U.S. So that goes along with your sacrifice theory, you know. There were people who came into life during World War II or right before World War II knowing they were here to save the world from the Antichrist, and they were probably going to die. Well, I mean, what a sacrifice that generation made. They went to war. Men couldn't wait to go to war, knowing full well they'd probably be killed. Women left the home and went to work in factories. I mean, that generation, every generation comes for its purpose, its contribution to the world. That generation's contribution was to defeat the Antichrist energy and pave the way for a brilliant future. We're here, I think, to help turn the world around when Maitreya comes forward.
Yeah, that's our fight.
That's
what we're
I
doing.
think.
And that's, yeah, I always look back at the Second World War. My father was, he fought in the Second World War. That generation grew up during the Great Depression.
Yep.
If the Great Depression didn't happen, what would their work ethic have been and their focus and their maturity level been to go into a global conflict like the Second World War at the age of 17, 18?
I never thought about that. That's a really good point.
You look at it now, you take a 16, 17, or you take a 17, 18, 19, you take a 20-year-old now and say, okay, I need you, you're going to go to training for a year in the military, and then we're going to send you to Europe, and you're going to have to walk across the continent fighting with this type of weapon. And those guys are going to be, yeah, no, I'm not going to go. like
I'll
what
pass.
Well, you and I, we're close. We're kind of brought up in that generation of our fathers would have been the Second World War, that kind of thing.
Yeah, my dad was.
When we were in high school, I don't know what your high school may have had this, where you had the picture of the previous graduating classes in the hall, and you'd walk by them and you look at the ones from the 1960s and you look at the 15, 16-year-old kids in those pictures and you swear that they're 40 years old. They're like, why do they all look so bloody old?
Right.
And going right back to the 1920s, 1930s, you're looking at their photographs going, yeah, they look like they're my grandparents, and they would have been probably back then. But why do they look like that? And you compare them to our grade and then the grades after that, where they just appear like babies after that. But them, whether it was just short hair, black and white pictures and, whatever they were wearing, we perceive them as being older. But listening to the stories of what a 18, 19-year-old kid did during the Second World War, what an 18, 19, 20-year-old woman did in a machine shop in a naval, like building ships.
Right.
Transposing that on today's generation is really hard.
Yes.
Like, the maturity level was different. And I always I fall back on were forced to grow up very quickly and have a greater responsibility for themselves and family that was caused by the Great Depression. So without the Great Depression, we may not have been capable or completely competent in what happened 20 years later in the Second World War.
Yep. Just like we might not have responded to all the needs of humanity right now were it not for the coronavirus getting us started. Yeah, I mean, these are really good analogies that you're bringing up, James, and I really like it. It makes a lot of sense to me. As I said earlier, we're here to learn and grow, and there's lots of opportunities to learn from this pandemic that we're in the middle of right now. We look at all the systems that aren't working. See, just to get into the age thing for a minute, I said Maitreya was here as the teacher for the age of Aquarius. Jesus was the teacher who came to inaugurate the age of Pisces. And as your listeners know, the symbol for Pisces is fish. And so he fed the crowd with fish, and he said, I'll make you fishers of men. And all these fish analogies in the Christian Bible, that's no accident. He knew he was the teacher for the age of Pisces. And Maitreya is here as the teacher for the age of Aquarius. And the symbol for the age of Aquarius is a man carrying a pot of water, which represents abundance because it's flowing out the waters of living life, flowing out of the pot he's carrying. Actually, well, let me do the astrology thing first. It's not astrology, it's astronomy. I'm not talking about the astrology printed in newspapers and magazines for entertainment. I'm talking about the movement of heavenly bodies through cosmos. Our solar system and our planet Earth don't sit still. We move in an elliptical orbit inside what we call the 12 constellations that make up the zodiac. And it takes about 28,000 years to make one orbit. And as we move through that, we come closer to each constellation one at a time, and that subjects us to the energy of these huge, huge heavenly bodies full of energies. Well, for the last 2,000 years, we have been next to and in alignment with the constellation Pisces, receiving Piscean energy. Piscean energy, the two primary energies of Pisces are dedication to an ideal, which saved the world, dedication to the ideal of freedom, saved the world from Hitler and the Antichrist energy, and individuality. Man has come out of the herd over the last 2,000 years. And so all this individuality, unfortunately, has caused separation. And we are the most separate we have ever been right now, and tremendous competition in almost every aspect of life, which is part of the separation energies of Pisces. These constellations' energies are used to help the evolution of the solar system and each planet. Well, now we're leaving the energies of Pisces and moving into the energies of Aquarius, which are cooperation and synthesis. The universe is going to take this strong individuals that were created in Pisces and now get them to work together as a group. Cooperation. We're moving from competition to cooperation. Well, Every institution we have, James, was built with Piscean energy. The healthcare system, the educational system, the military, the financial system, you name it. All of it has been built with Piscean energy, and Piscean energy is being withdrawn. So all they can do is collapse, and that's exactly what's happening. Healthcare system doesn't work anymore. Educational system doesn't work. The government doesn't represent the people. The financial system is bouncing all over the place. They need to be rebuilt with the energies of Aquarius, of cooperation and working together and synthesis, and then these great institutions will serve humanity for the next 2,000 years. So all of this crumbling is happening at this time, and that's part of this whole thing, is that stuff doesn't work. The coronavirus is helping point out some of these in ways that we would magnify them. You know, that's the thing about, you remember when the Catholic Church had all these priests that were being exposed for molesting young boys and children and so on. Well, that's part of the cleaning out process. It doesn't look like it when it's happening because all you see is bad stuff, but it's got to rise to the surface in order to be cleaned out, addressed and cleaned out. That's what the coronavirus is doing. It's bringing a lot of this stuff to the surface so we can't possibly not see it. And then we can address it and start cleaning it out. So this is a big thing that's going on right now.
I see all these kind of global events or tragedies as a example of what we need to fix. I've always talked about the hurricane going through Puerto Rico and people saying, oh, that's devastating. I said, pay attention. Imagine what would happen if the electricity was shut off in your city for a month. Do you have cash to buy things, or do you use your credit cards? Because they won't work anymore.
That's right.
That's what happened in Puerto Rico. People were bartering again. Things became more community. If you could bake a pie, I will trade you a chicken. That was what was going on. So that's an example of what would happen. What if there was a solar flare like 1854, back when there wasn't a lot of electricity? If that happened today and 70% of our electricity got shut off, how would you live your day? Could you buy gas for your car? No, unless they're taking loaves of bread that you just happened to be able to, you had the supplies to bake. If you went to the bank to get cash, why would the person who works at the bank be at the bank when they probably wouldn't want to be home looking after their families?
Yes.
It's like you may not have access to it. And if going to a bank nowadays to say, here is my deposit book, do you mind if I take some money out of the account? It's like, well, no, we have no access because our computers are down. So we don't know how much money you actually have in there because we don't have those books anymore.
Tragedy can be a great teacher, and crisis often leads to transformation. And that's the process I think we're going through. You talked about COVID 20 and 21. We don't know how long this learning process is going to go on, but change doesn't occur overnight. As you know, change is a process. And so that process is, I hope, seriously beginning now. And hopefully, as we go on, we will continue this process of change. And that's what the masters are here for, James. There's going to be, Maitreya doesn't come alone. There are 14 masters on the planet right now in physical bodies. None of them are going to come forward until Maitreya comes forward first. Just like the space people that are here helping us aren't going to come forward until Maitreya. It's not their planet. He's going to come forward first because he's from our planet, and then the other masters that are from planet Earth will come forward. But there's going to be a master in every major department of life making suggestions and guiding us if we will follow their suggestions. In finance, in government, in healthcare, in education, in the arts, in every aspect of life, there will be a master. There will be over 40 masters by the time this age is over, with us, walking amongst us, making suggestions, open to questions, and giving information, and what we do with it is totally up to us. It'll be very individual decisions and very, very individual experiences, but they're here to guide us into this brilliant future. We've lost our way. That's one of the things Maitreya is going to do on his declaration, day of declaration, if the plan holds, is he's going to give us all, in our mind's eye, we will see as if we're living in it, we will see the past and where humanity has lost its way. And then we'll see, he'll give us a glimpse of this brilliant, brilliant future that humanity has in store if we make the right choices. And he will use that vision of the future to inspire us to choose wisely and to start taking more action. So they come to help turn this world around and get it back on the path that was originally designed by nature or by the creator or by God or whatever you want to call it. We've lost our way, and they are here to help us get back on the path, and they'll be with us. Like I said, Maitreya will be at the center of humanity for the next 2,000 years. So every time your listeners come back in their next lifetime, he will be at the center of the universe. So the reason I'm telling your listeners all this, James, is because when he does come forward, I want people to know what's going on. They'll have a clue, and then they can tell their friends or their family exactly what happened, if it seems like it makes sense to them. He's also going to give us an experience of the love of God in our hearts like we have never felt it before. He said it will be as if I physically embrace you. That's how powerful it will be. A lot of people will be crying. I'll probably be one of them. And the other thing that's going to happen if it comes out like he plans is while he's talking to humanity for 25, 35, 45 minutes, nobody knows how long, there will be press reports after he's done from all around the world that while he was speaking, hundreds of thousands of people were miraculously healed. And in those three ways, you'll know that this is Maitreya. He's the world teacher, and we can follow his suggestions or not. But he won't speak in your ears. You'll see his face on TV, but his lips won't move. You'll hear his words in your head telepathically. Everybody will, in their own native language, whatever it is. And to the less educated people, they'll hear certain words. The more educated people will hear other words. He's got this consciousness that can encompass everybody. I mean, I can't imagine that. But that's what it'll be like, and then we'll know, well, this is the world teacher, and we can follow his suggestions or not. He said he told his Benjamin Creme's master, who told Benjamin Creme, because Benjamin Creme said, does Maitreya have his billion yet? A long time ago in some writings, Maitreya said there was a time when 10,000 men could change the world. There was a time when 100,000 couldn't. I will call upon 1 billion. And Benjamin Creme said, does Maitreya have his billion yet? And his master said there are almost 2 billion people ready to respond when Maitreya comes forward, which is way more than the critical mass he said he needed. So I'm telling you, your listeners that need to know there's a brilliant future ahead of us once we work our way through this coronavirus impact and start making changes in the planet. It's a great time to be alive. Great time to be alive. His master said within 2 years of Maitreya coming forward, starvation on the planet will end. That's how fast. Some things will happen very quickly and some won't. Some will take time. But that's pretty fast. Because we've got all this. We've got a 14% per capita surplus of food right now in the world. But a lot of it is sitting in these storage bins in the Western world until we get the right price for it. And if we don't get the right price, it rots. It's not getting distributed, and we need to come up with ways to do that. Apparently, there are plans already made for distribution, equitable distribution, according to needs, not according to wants, but according to the needs of each nation, each country. There'll be no one world government. Every Maitreya said, and the master said, every country has its own personality, and those personalities contribute to the whole of the planet. So there'll be no one world government. People that are worried about that can relax a little bit. People that are worried about the Antichrist can relax a little bit, because the Antichrist for our time is come and gone. So I'm telling you, it's a great time to be alive. It just doesn't look like it right now.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier was if we make the right choices.
Yes.
And that is something that my listener understands from a number of the shows we've had on here with people who have the ability to get information from outside sources, outside this planet. And it comes down to, you get, this is what could happen. This is a bit of a prophecy. This is what will happen. But there's an if at the end of it. Because we can change the direction. If a negative is coming and enough people concentrate on that negative going away, it will go away. So we have the ability to change what could happen impact us as a negative by just focusing on it. And
absolutely,
if we make the right choices, if we make those choices and make them positive, yeah, we can, well, literally the expression is move mountains, because we can actually do that. We can change the direction of the way things are going. One of the things that you've spoken about in the past is Maitreya predicting numerous events that later came to pass, including the breakup of the Soviet Union, end of apartheid in South Africa with the release of Nelson Mandela.
Man, you have a good memory.
These things are ways we can look back and say, okay, you got those two things right. What else? But like any other prophet, people say, well, yeah, he said this, but it hasn't happened, or it didn't happen. Well, it's like, well, it didn't happen. He actually was predicting positives. When you prophesize a negative, a lot of times those won't happen, because enough people who hear the prophecy says, well, I'm going to just think happy thoughts about that, and maybe it'll go away. And it does go away. We haven't, there's a tipping point of positive, negative energy. And if we have enough positive thinking about it, we can address what is to come and make things a little bit better for us. We can call those, there are people just understanding it, focusing on it, it becomes, oh, it's a miracle. It changed. Look, this was definitely going to happen. And all of a sudden, for some reason, we were all saved. It's a miracle. Well, miracles come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and are influenced by those who are beings who are walking around in our meat sacks right now, as well as the beings that are protecting us, whether they're from other planets working with us or they are our masters. They can be affected by a lot of things, because if it's right, if it is the right path, it's going to happen.
Yeah, we can definitely change things because we have free will. That's what happened after World War II. Is the masters see ultimately where things are going to end up. What they don't know is the timing, because we have free will. And one of the things they didn't predict was the Cold War. Right after World War II ended, we went into the Cold War, and boom, things just got solid as a brick again. And it took a long time to get through that Cold War and come out the other end to allow Maitreya and the masters to come forward. It's one of the reasons it's taken so long. He didn't want to wait this long. He hates seeing people starve to death every day, mostly children. He can't stand that. He sees the suffering of humanity, the women that walk 10 hours a day to get firewood for their family so their family can eat rice or whatever they have in, Saharan Africa. I mean, he can't stand this. He carries the burden of this pain of humanity in his heart. I can't imagine doing that. I have enough trouble carrying the pain of what I did in this lifetime that I didn't like. But he does. And so we have free will, and that's why I say his plans for Day of Declaration, but I don't know if it's going to come off that way. It might come off a little different way. He may do it with a part of the humanity and then another part of humanity and then another. You may do it in sections. I don't know. We don't know how it's going to ultimately happen, but that's his plan. Because we can change it with our free will. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, damn free will. Was that some kind of joke?
Learn and grow.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit on the space beings.
Yes.
Being here. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
So what do you know?
Sure.
How
Benjamin Creme has a book out.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Benjamin Creme has a book out.
Benjamin Creme has a book out called The Gathering of the Forces of Light, UFOs and Their Spiritual Mission. It's available on Amazon. The Gathering of the Forces of Light, Creme, C-R-E-M-E, UFOs and Their Spiritual Mission. Benjamin Creme, before he started traveling the world, like I said, for over 40 years, telling this story to prepare people for the world teachers coming, he worked a lot with the space people. He knew George Adamski. They worked together to a great extent for a while, and he he traveled with the space people. He got to know them quite well. I don't call them aliens because that's a horrible name made up for them by the Western governments who want us to be afraid of them. Well, they actually say two things. They say, number one, they don't exist, and number two, they're evil. They're bad people. So it can't be both ways. I mean, one or the other. Actually, it's neither. My information is they're here on a mission of mercy. They're here to help. Most of them are from our neighboring planets, Mars and Venus, one on each side. Their science is thousands of years ahead of ours, and that's why they can do this. There's a basic misunderstanding about space people that our science is too limited to acknowledge right now, and that is planet Earth is just the right distance from the sun that we can have solid, liquid, and gaseous bodies and life. We can have huge oceans. We can have human bodies made up of mostly water and physical. We don't burn to death and we don't freeze to death. But that's what would happen if we were on any other planet. We have to protect ourselves in suits when we go there. We can't live like a normal person. Our planet is the only planet that can have solid physical life. But my information from Benjamin Creme is that all the planets there's humanity on every planet in our solar system. But because our science is so limited, we don't realize the Ageless Wisdom talks about above physical, liquid, and gas. They each have a higher vibration than the other one. Above gas, which you can't see, touch, smell most of the time, or feel, there's another level of physical life called etheric physical. Like ether is a very high, fine vibration gas. It's etheric physical. Now, if you have etheric vision, you can see etheric physical. Most people don't. A few people do. Those are people that can see auras and things like that. I suspect you have etheric vision, or at least the beginnings of it, James. Most people don't. And I have a friend who can see the aura around leaves on trees. I mean, it's really cool. That's the beginning of etheric vision. Now, the people that live on Mars have etheric vision. They see each other just like you and I would see each other in our cars and our houses and our buildings and transportation, all that stuff. They see it like we do, but we land a camera on Mars, it sees nothing but desolation because the camera doesn't have etheric vision. They have physical bodies. Mars, according to Benjamin Creme, Mars has more people on it than Earth, 8 billion people on Mars. And it's a smaller planet, so guess what? Martians are shorter. They're smaller. People on Venus is almost a perfect planet. These planets evolve as their human races evolves on the planet. And Venus is almost a perfected planet. That means the people on Venus are almost perfect. They're very tall, very beautiful. 7 feet is no exception on Venus at all. They're just beautiful, beautiful people from what I understand from Benjamin Creme. Even the Pope said that. The Pope had an experience of one of these people in 1961 that was written up in the newspapers. And I can get into that story. But yes, there are humans on every planet, and there was a time when the bad ones could travel. My understanding is now that has been eliminated. The bad beings from other planets cannot travel. They're not allowed to space travel anymore. Now, they don't come from the Pleiades, is my information. They don't come from Sirius. They have their own issues. All these space people come from within our solar system. Mars is the manufacturing planet. They love to build stuff. And so they make most of the spacecraft for our solar system. The planets put in their orders, and then they make them the developed planets. Now, their bodies are etheric, but if they want to, they can lower the vibration of their physical body and become temporarily physical, solid physical like we are. Well, the same thing is true of their spacecraft. Their spacecraft is etheric. You can't see it unless you have etheric vision. People with etheric vision see them up there. They're up there in the thousands every day in the sky. What they do when they want us to see them, they simply lower the vibration of their craft, and the craft becomes temporarily solid physical, and then we see them. And then if they want to disappear, they can either fly away really fast, or they can just raise the vibration of their craft and poof, they disappear. They're still there, but we can't see them anymore. That's the misunderstanding. Now, science has actually discovered etheric physical, but they don't know what they have. They call it dark matter. Dark matter, and they say dark matter is everywhere in the universe. Yes, it is. It's etheric physical. Even us solid human beings on planet Earth have an etheric body that surrounds our physical body, and that's where the auras come from. But that's the idea that people don't understand because our science is so limited, is that there's etheric life on every planet in our solar system. Some are developed way beyond us. Some are, you wouldn't want to meet them in a dark alley. They're not developed at all. But Mars and Venus, Mars is in the same stage of life as planet Earth. The Ageless Wisdom says that each planet goes through seven phases and 7 rounds. Each round is millions of years. Planet Earth is in the middle of the 4th round, so is Mars. And when in the middle of the 4th round is when the people on the planet start to wake up. And that's what's happening with us right now, is we're starting to wake up. Venus, on the other hand, is in the 7th round. They're in the final round. And those people, Benjamin Creme said, if you talk to somebody from Venus, you would think they were a god. That's how wise and loving they are. They're here on a mission of mercy because we can't end starvation and war and pollution. And so what's happening, James, is planet Earth is holding back the evolution of the solar system. There's a plan for each planet. Each planet has a god. There's a plan for each planet. They're different. And then there's a plan for the solar system. There's a god for the solar system. And so each god for the planet contributes to the solar system plan, and then each god for the solar system reports to the god for our galaxy, which is the Milky Way galaxy. So that's why it's a hierarchy. They're at different levels, and they each have an area of responsibility. And so we're holding back the evolution, the plan of the solar system. So just like when the human body gets hurt, parts of our body rush in, the white corpuscles and so on, to help heal it and repair it. Our spiritual hierarchy has asked the hierarchy of other planets in the solar system to come help. And so they have like huge motherships that are, now they're etheric, so they can be in the ground, in the oceans, and in the air. And they're there 24/7, mopping up pollution, mostly etheric nuclear pollution, which we don't even know exists because our instruments are too crude to measure it. But it's the deadliest of the nuclear energy. They're mopping up this pollution 24/7, but they can't mop it all up because karmically, it's not their mess. It's our mess. We need to clean it up. So they're limited karmically on how much they can clean it up, but they're doing it 24/7 to the limit they can, and have been for decades, to keep this planet alive until we wake up and finish the job. So we owe our space brothers and sisters, and they're humans. Benjamin Creme said that's all that's throughout cosmos. It's not about creatures with, horns on the top of their head and huge wings. He said there may be creatures like that, but they're not human. The human beings are all throughout cosmos, including our solar system, and that's the nature of the solar system according to the Ageless Wisdom.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Isn't it?
Imagine all those gods going to the meeting, and they get down to Earth, and they say, so what's going on there? And the guy just shaking his head goes, my guys are idiots. We're still having a challenge here. And all the rest of them are looking at them like, oh, come on, you get your stuff together, dude.
Right.
We're all doing fine, but why?
I said there are 63 masters. They meet every 250 years, whether they have to or not. Can you imagine that? That's how time passes for them. There is no time. So, but exactly. You're absolutely right. They know they've got a mess on their hands, and so they're asked for help to clean it up until we wake up.
Fascinating. Have you heard, now this is, again, this a bit on the ET side of things, there are reptilian extraterrestrials, there are numerous, they come from all over the place. But there is there was or is possibly an agreement made a millennia ago for those people who haven't awakened on this planet, when the time comes to like, okay, shit or get off the pot, as my grandmother would say, those who haven't awakened, or the lower vibration humans, are going to be taken. They're going to leave.
The other way around.
It's the higher vibration ones that are leaving.
Right. It's my understanding. It's my understanding, according to the Ageless Wisdom, that most of humanity will evolve through thousands of lifetimes. By the time you know you're a living soul, you're in the final stretch. You only have 10, 12, 15 lifetimes left. But we've all had thousands of lifetimes. We've all been every race. We've been both sexes. We've been every sex. We've been abandoned, we've been killed, we've killed others, we've abandoned others. We've had all these experiences. By the time you know that you're a living soul, your karma is way better than your good karma is way better than your bad karma, and so on. But yeah, as the planets perfect, what will happen, and this is what they said, the Ageless Wisdom says about planet Earth, is that people will graduate to the spiritual universe, the consciousness universe, when they've learned all the lessons the planet has to teach us. And those that are the lowest evolved, that aren't anywhere near there yet, when the planet is becoming a perfect planet, is those souls will either have to start over on planet Earth or start over on another planet. Most likely another planet, because planet Earth will become a perfected planet. And when planets become perfect, they become etheric. They disappear. We have a perfect planet in our solar system, and its name is Vulcan. Believe it or not, that there is a perfect planet in our solar system that we can't see. It's a hidden planet, and its name is Vulcan, and that's because it's perfect. But as the planet and its people are perfected, that small group who can't get there will have to start over somewhere else. Yeah, it's not a good place to be.
Okay, the way I was told, and this is new to me.
Yeah, that's cool.
Is that those who haven't awakened are going to be taken for food by black reptilians.
Yeah.
The deal has already been made. There won't be a flood to cleanse the planet. There's just going to be a big tone, and certain people are going to leave. And the ones who are staying are going to be responsible, using the technology that we already have, because that technology is not going away, is to basically get the planet back on course. So about, was it 2/3 of the population will be going. But that's, anyway, I thought I'd throw that one out at you.
Yeah, interesting. That's not my information, but like we said earlier, it's all prophecy. How do we know,
Yeah, and I always jokingly say I had the Archangel Michael drop by on a couple of episodes back through channeling, and he's the one who basically comes through and says, why would you be giving a view into the future, a future like that, if you had no way of changing it?
Right.
Yeah, you wouldn't have been given that prophecy.
That's right. That's how the masters work. It's exactly how they work. It's like we have all these previous lives, and we've murdered people, and we've done all these nasty things, but we can't remember them. We're not allowed to remember our previous lifetimes until we're evolved enough to be able to handle it. Now, that's them being kind to us. Just like you said.
I had a really cool past life regression where I found that I was actually, as my father was in a B-25 bomber flying from England to bomb Normandy, just, pre, like early, a year or two before D-Day, and then right up to the night of D-Day. I was actually in a German bomber flying over bombing England from France.
Wow.
So that's, talk about the karma switch.
Yeah.
My dad was flying one way and I was flying the other way at the time. And I was from Freiburg, Germany, and I could describe myself, and I knew how I died later after the war and where I lived and all this other stuff. And I was fascinated. It was like, holy crap. But I actually asked, when I went into the past life regression, I said, I want to know specifically in this time frame, because for some reason I know an awful lot about Second World War aircraft. And in hindsight, my dad never talked about the Second World War being on aircraft. So, of course, I'm like you. I grew up in the 60s watching, 60s, 70s watching war TV shows. But boy, did I know how to the insides of especially German aircraft.
That's really interesting.
So I had the past life regression. I said, what about this time frame? And sure enough, I was in an airplane. I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I realized, oh, crap, I'm not in the Allies Air Force.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's that's true. A lot of people that think they remember a previous life, they were a king or a queen or a princess or whatever like that. I mean, somebody had to be a chimney sweep.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody had to fly those German planes.
I found that, actually, a friend of mine, a lady I interviewed years ago, she's Jewish. She lives in New York. She went to an air show with a boyfriend at the time, and a plane started up, and she said, oh, that's an albatross. And the guy looked at her and said, what are you talking about? And she goes, oh, that's and she started describing these German First World War aircraft.
Wow. Her
past life regression, she was taken across a bridge by some guy she didn't know at the time, but then realized later he was one of her best friends in her other life as a World War I pilot, very anti-Semitic, who died on a hill in Belgium. And she and later on her now husband or partner went to Belgium, and she said, this is the hill I died on, and this was where my Air Force base would have been in this area. And they drove out, and sure enough, the farmer says, oh yeah, there was in First World War, there was an Air Force base there. You can go out and look. And she was out on the tarmac saying, well, this is where the mess hall was, and this is where our quarters were.
Wow.
But she remembered it all.
And of course,
in this life, and she was so anti-Semitic back then, because she actually found out the guy's name and his history, very anti-Semitic, macho guy, comes back in this life as a Jewish woman.
Yep.
Also a very strong woman too.
Yeah.
Very strong woman.
Yeah.
But that was the karmic switch.
Very interesting.
That came in. Yeah, but very interesting. I really do not like cigarette smoke. I've never liked being around it. That's how I died. I died of respiratory failure caused by heavy smoking.
Absolutely.
Bitching and complaining to the nurse that I had to wear an oxygen mask in the hospital. Back when I was in the Air Force, damn it, they made us wear. It's like a typical old guy dying in the hospital. Yeah. That's how I passed. So that's why I'm not, I don't like being around smoke. So it's kind of, you can see little bits and pieces, but that was me actually. If for people out there, if you're going to do a past life regression, just go in and see what they show you. I actually asked for a specific, who knows. But I've also, you were talking about the Joan of Arc, people wanting, back in my past life, I was Joan of Arc, or Cleopatra and stuff like that. I'm finding that our souls, without our meat sack, our little energies, specifically for people who may come from almost like a hybrid background, that kind of, my labs and all that kind of stuff. If they come into a life and they say, you know what, I want to go back because time is not linear.
Right.
Next life, I want to be Joan of Arc. Well, they can do that. In hindsight, they can go back and be those people, but they're not the only ones in that body at the time. That body, Joan of Arc at the time, could have 1,000 different
consciousness. Yeah.
Experiencing what she did, which in turn, and this is where it's circle of life, in turn makes that being, that human, a lot more divine than they would have been, because they're not just housing one being, but they're housing so many more.
Interesting.
So that's something to kind of file in the back of your head. So that's why, I was Joan of Arc in a life, and you kind of look at people going, yeah, okay. Or I had a past life regression and I was Cleopatra. Really? Did you see, was there any slaves there that possibly you could have been?
Yeah, right.
No, I was Cleopatra. I was like, okay, fine.
Yeah, and that's the thing about prejudice, for example. I mean, if you hate African American people, guess what karma is going to bring you back as? An African American. So you can have that experience. Like some of these women just hate men. Not a lot. But there are a few out there who just, and as a general rule, they hate men. They're going to come back as a man so they can experience what it's like to be hated by women. I mean, that's the way karma works. It teaches these lessons. For example, a lot of the Israelites were Germans because
Yes.
the Germans persecuted the Jews, and now they come back as a Jew to find out what it's like to be persecuted, and so they have this tremendous family history of persecution that they have to deal with in that lifetime. That's the way karma works. So it just doesn't work to be prejudiced against anybody, because that's you're gonna suffer it. What we give out is what we get back. Jesus said, "As you sow, so shall you reap." Every major religion has cause and effect or karma taught in it, using just slightly different words, but it's one of the great laws of life. We determine our life from moment to moment to moment to moment. If I cut off somebody on the freeway, guess what's going to happen to me within probably the next week? Somebody's going to cut me off. That's exactly how it works. So if you want people to be thoughtful of you, be thoughtful of them. If you want people to be kind to you, be kind to them. That's exactly how it works. There are great karma, lords of karma, and they're on Sirius. We're lucky to have Sirius as a sister solar system, because Sirius is very advanced, according to Benjamin Creme and his master. Very, very advanced, and evolution on Sirius is very fast. It's you learn lessons really quick there, or else. So the lords of karma are responsible for making karma work out on planet Earth. And that's their job. And so it always does. Now, it's possible to receive a little grace from the spiritual kingdom that will help overcome some of the karma. But most of it, we have to work out ourselves. That's why people who've passed over and then come back from the dead have said they had a life's review. A lot of children say that. I got to see my life. They saw the ripple effect of their actions, negative actions and positive actions. And that's what we'll all do once we pass over, is we'll review our life. We're not judged by the masters. They never judge us. They know exactly what it's like to be us, because they were us. They had every experience. They've killed people. They've been killed. They've had all those experiences. So they don't sit and judge of us. They just love us. They want to serve us. But we do our own life's review. We do our own judging, and we don't really judge so much as we're supposed to learn from that life review. Yeah.
Before we can move on.
Yeah, and every lifetime, the soul takes a different body, and every lifetime, the soul remembers where we left off in our evolutionary growth from our previous lifetime. So our next lifetime, that's where we start. We pick up where we left off. And you don't have to grow at all in any lifetime. You have free will. But if you do, your soul will remember it. And when it takes the embryo, you decide with a master or a guide where you should be born to achieve the purposes of the next lifetime. There's usually 2 or 3 purposes in each lifetime. One is always to serve humanity, and by serving humanity, to serve the spiritual world as well. But the other 1 or 2 are individual purposes for that lifetime, and we decide where we want to be, and then we go into that embryo somewhere around the 2nd month or 3rd month. In the first trimester, the soul attaches to the new body. And then it picks up right where it left off. So everything just makes so much sense, James, to me. And that's why I love this stuff. It's logical. It makes sense if you think about it. And so that's my information.
That's it. That's you?
That's it.
Yeah, sure, that's it. We could go on for about another 5 hours.
I'm sure we could. I've really loved this. Good. This has been great.
Yeah, well, thank you. We've been talking to Dick Larson. He is a volunteer. You're a volunteer at Share International.
Yes.
Where can people come to learn about that?
Thank you for asking. I would recommend the United States, the Southern California website as a place to start, and I'll give that website now. It's www.share, S-H-A-R-E, international, all spelled out, SoCal, that stands for Southern California, SOCAL. So there's no dots, there's no spaces, there's no dashes. ShareInternationalSoCal.org, not .com, agelesswisdom.org. And that's a beautiful website. It's a great place to just get a kind of a thumbprint of the Ageless Wisdom and the World Teacher. And then you can click through to the main Share International website from there if you want to explore further. And like I said, Benjamin Creme has some books on Amazon if you want to kind of browse through them and see if any interest you. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, James.
Oh, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
That'd be great.
Watching you while you sleep all alone.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. And hey. Let's be careful out there.
Far over the snow